First news update for you right now. The State Department of Health is announcing 21 more deaths from the coronavirus in Central Florida. There were 6 deaths from COVID-19 in Brevard County, 5 in Volusia, 4 in Polk, 2 in Osceola, and 1 each in Lake, Orange, Seminole, and Sumter counties. They were among a record 120 statewide, along with almost 9,000 new cases of the virus. We always update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning on Good Morning Orlando.
Now on FM 94.1, still on FM 93.1, 107.7 HD3, AM 540, and the iHeart Radio app. This is News Radio WFLA Orlando.
So I kind of predicted this would happen, and it is happening. There is a growing chorus pushing for renewed shutdown orders. And as the music heard there, I have a feeling a lot of our audience is not going to take it. We're already seeing it on the text line. You can text to 23680. When I say a growing chorus pushing for renewed shutdown orders, I'm actually reading a headline that was on Drudge Report this morning. This is from the Stanford Advocate, but I got the link straight out of Drudge, and I'm hearing more and more of this. People are saying we have to shut down again, at least in these states that are seeing a rise in cases. Now, just to go over the numbers again, we went over it just a minute ago, but yesterday another 8,935 cases were reported in Florida and 120 new fatalities. That is the most yet. So that's more than we saw back in April when we were at the peak, really. So a lot of people are concerned about this, and they feel like we need to shut down again. One person who brought that up is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He was on the Journal podcast by the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago. He was asked about this. Here's what he said.
I think any state that is having a serious problem, that state should seriously look at shutting down. It's not for me to say because each state is different.
So you're going to hear more and more of this. Not just from medical experts like Fauci, but from people on the left and politicians saying we have no choice. I think we do have a choice, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. We are not at the point where we have to shut down. In fact, I think another shutdown could make things worse. That being said, here's Governor Ron DeSantis yesterday trying to give some perspective, saying we don't need to panic.
A case does not necessarily mean someone's in the hospital or anything like that. It just means they tested positive. And so I think folks should just view it in the proper context and perspective. We would like to see positivity decline. We understand, much more about this virus. You should take precautions, but there's no need to be panicked. There's no need to be fearful. We understand the situations that make this thing more transmissible.
So I think he's exactly right there. But what's the biggest reason I believe we should not shut down again? Well, Buddy Dyer, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, actually said it on our show yesterday. I don't usually agree with him, but this time I did. He gave a reason why he really doesn't want to go there again.
We have to learn to coexist with this virus because I don't see a vaccine coming anytime soon. And Dr. Pino said it pretty well one time. We can't ping pong back and forth between being open, being closed, being open, being closed, because we could do that forever if we don't have a vaccine. We could relax the rules and go to full capacity at restaurants and then be at 1,500 positive tests and have to roll back. So I'm just imploring everybody to do what we can as our civic duty is to protect each other, protect the businesses.
Yeah, I don't say this much, but Buddy Dyer is exactly right there. That's what I've been saying since the beginning. I never hear a good answer to that question. If we shut down again and the cases go down like we want, what is to prevent it from going back up once we reopen again? Are we just going to have rolling shutdowns where we ping pong back and forth? How would our economy survive that? So many businesses are failing already. You're going to have even more and more businesses fail. And when you talk about unemployment, when you talk about businesses failing, that's people's livelihoods. That's people's purpose. That's their lives too. Now, another reason why people say we need to shut down is hospitalization for COVID seems to be going up. There's a lot of confusion in these numbers because it's not being reported directly from the hospitals who is in the hospital right now because of COVID-19. We just know the totals. I tried to get someone on the show today. I couldn't get anyone on. But I know that the CEO of Advent Health, Daryl Toll, he did a Facebook live video yesterday talking about this. He says the hospitals have plenty capacity right now. Here he is.
Are our hospitals at full capacity?
They are not. Thankfully, we're managing the increase well. There is an increase. We're testing more across the state, and the percentage of positives is going up too, and we are seeing an increase in hospitalizations across the state. In our hospitals, we have about 84% capacity across 7 counties, 16 campuses in total, and ICU capacity is actually a little bit better, 81%. That means almost 20% of our ICU beds are still available for additional patients, and about 16% of total beds. To put that in context, that's normal. So our health system, many health systems in Florida, operate in this range of capacity on a regular basis. The growth of COVID is something we're paying close attention to, but the capacity level is still within a manageable range for us.
And I'm glad he put that in perspective because I'm not hearing that enough. We have seen an increase, but he says the capacity, compared to most years, is actually normal. So if hospitals are ready right now, why would we shut down again? 407-916-5400. You can also text to 23680. We'll talk more about this next. And, of course, we have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well in 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando. Another headline for you right now. Hospitals in Volusia County are feeling the effects of the rise in coronavirus cases. State health officials say 3 Advent Health hospitals in DeLand, Daytona Beach, and Orange City had no ICU beds yesterday. Among its 5 hospitals in Volusia and Flagler counties, only 2% of ICU beds were available. But hospital officials say across Central Florida, they actually have 20% of their ICU beds available. We always update the top stories every 10 minutes on News Radio WFLA Orlando.
News Radio WFLA Orlando is available everywhere with the iHeartRadio app. Now #1 for podcasting. News Radio WFLA Orlando, an iHeart radio station.
There's no doubt that there's some concerns over the rise in cases and the rise in deaths in Florida and Central Florida. But I have to agree with Mayor Buddy Dyer. We have to learn to live with this thing. We can't have back and forth shutdowns. And a shutdown alone isn't going to work. We shut down before it went down, but then we just opened up again and it went up. We can't keep doing this. We have to learn to mitigate it without shutdowns.
Yeah, and part of that is being responsible. And
responsible in 2020?
How dare you?
I know, and I've brought this up before, and I know many of our listeners hate to hear it, but if you're going to have reopening, you need to be responsible, and that includes wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. That includes social distancing. That includes washing your hands. If people were doing these things, we might not have the spike that we've had following the reopening of bars, following the holiday weekends that we've had, July 4th and Memorial Day.
What do you think, Melissa?
Did you hear that from your barber while you were getting bloodletting? I'm just kidding. That's an old. I'm just messing. Yeah, right. Let's go way far back. No, seriously, I agree with you. I believe that people have been how do you say that?
Lackadaisical.
Okay,
yeah, there you go.
Lackadaisical.
See, he said it wrong too. Lackadaisical. Oops. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, the point is, people have been slacking. Y'all got crazy. You were stuck in the house for a while. Then you got let out, and you were like, woohoo! And you threw caution to the wind, didn't you? And you know who you are. I'm talking to you. You hear me.
Yeah, and people say, oh, well, I'm tired of the coronavirus. Well, it doesn't matter if you're tired of the coronavirus. The coronavirus isn't tired of you. It's still looking for you.
And a shutdown can't solve that problem, like I said, because it'll solve it temporarily, but eventually we'll have to open up again. And if we're lazy again, if we're slacking again, it'll just spread. Now, the good news so far as it seems to be spreading among young people, asymptomatic, and they're not as affected by this as much. But when you hear there's 120 deaths yesterday, I do wish there was more
clarity
when it comes to the hospitalizations. I feel like it's just confusing. We're not hearing, are they in the hospital just because of coronavirus, or were they already there and then they got tested?
Now I heard from the health officials of Florida that they said that if you tested positive for the virus and you were in there for another reason, say a motorcycle accident or something, and you die, they put you down as a COVID, death, because you tested positive, and they need those numbers, And
I think there is an increase because of the virus.
Sure.
But I just feel like some of those numbers are kind of confusing. What does the text line say, Melissa?
The text line is on fire, as a matter of fact. No, do not shut down the country. Instead, have nutritionalists teach people how to build up their immunity systems. Yes, your immune systems are very important. It goes on to say really healthy people will be able to sustain the virus, or at least not die from it. No one ever talks about the immune system. Actually, we do.
Yeah.
We have.
And on your show Connections, I know you have.
All the time, yes. All the time. Here's another one. Maybe tennis should be banned.
Tennis should be banned?
I don't know. I'm reading the text line, guys. You ask.
Of all the sports, that's the one.
Tennis.
Now, as hesitant as I've been to venture out in public in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, I do play tennis twice a week, but when you're playing tennis, you're about 40 feet away from the person you're playing against. And otherwise, we wear masks to and from the court, and we stay apart when we're, not on the court. I think tennis is one of the last things we need to worry about.
Well, I kind of agree with you on that. Couldn't quite understand that. Alan, I know you have more news at the bottom of the hour dealing with the virus.
And other things like President Trump heading to Florida, and the search for a TV star continues. Those stories and others, plus traffic and weather together in just 2 minutes. 6:29 on Good Morning Orlando.
News update right now. President Trump is slamming two new Supreme Court rulings. He called the rulings part of a witch hunt and a hoax. The Supreme Court said investigators in New York can seek Trump's financial records. In another case involving congressional subpoenas against Trump, it sent it to the lower court. We're going to have a legal expert on later in the show on this very issue, so you want to stay tuned for that about 8:40 this morning. We always update the top stories every 10 minutes on Good Morning Orlando.
Now on FM 94.1, still on FM 93.1, News Radio WFLA Orlando, and still on AM 540.
So, ever since, the 70s and 80s, the two top candidates for president end up having a debate on national television. We kind of expected every 4 years during presidential contests. Will it happen this year, though? There is some suggestion out there that Biden will not debate Trump, and there are some people on Biden's side who say he shouldn't debate Trump. Now, the top headline on this yesterday was from Thomas Friedman in his column where he says Biden should not debate Trump unless. Now, I'm going to tell you the real reason why Biden doesn't want to debate Trump in just a moment. But this is what Thomas Friedman says. He says, first, Biden should declare that he will take part in a debate only if Trump releases his tax returns for 2016 through 2018. Okay, whatever. They're always making the tax returns a big deal. Second, Biden should insist that a real-time fact-checking team approved by both candidates be hired by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates, and that 10 minutes before the scheduled conclusion of the debate, this team report on any misleading statements, phony numbers, or outright lies either candidate has uttered. That way, no one in the massive television audience can go away easily misled. I don't think that's going to happen. They're never going to agree on the fact-checking organizations. You can't make that nonpartisan, especially in today's world. So people are saying a debate might not happen. Now, originally it was because of the pandemic, and they thought it wouldn't be a good idea to have a debate because of the pandemic. But, I mean, you can social distance and just not have an audience. That being said, I think the real reason Biden doesn't want to debate Trump is because he doesn't want to make this election about him. Once you make this election a referendum on Biden and who he is, it doesn't look good for Biden. All of a sudden, you're recognizing all of his faults, and you're seeing how much he's going to have to either placate to the radical left in his party, or he's going to come off as too moderate, and the radical left in his party won't want to vote for him, and maybe they'll write in Bernie Sanders or something. Plus, you'll see his senility, I guess. It seems like he's going senile or has beginning stages of dementia. These are things Biden doesn't want to highlight. He wants to make this election a referendum on Trump. And right now, the best way to do that is to stay out of the way, it seems like, because the polls, I know a lot of our audience doesn't believe the polls, but the polls don't look good for Trump. Trump has some problems in terms of getting reelected, and Biden would rather just stay out of the way and let the media continue to bash Trump and make this election a referendum on Trump.
Maybe.
I think a debate would not look good for Biden, and he doesn't want to do it.
Not at all. Because, first of all, he will lose his cool so quickly. I mean, he's already called a voter fat. He's challenged this guy to a push-up contest, right? Multiple occasions, he's like, I want to fight Trump. He even said he wanted to fight him behind the bleachers, like they're in high school or something. You know? So I think if he got out on a debate floor, Trump would just push a button or two, and
Trump's good at that.
Yeah, and I don't think it'd work out very well for Biden at all. It's
I mean, Trump's going to try to get Biden riled up, and it just doesn't work for him. Biden would much rather make this a referendum on Trump because he thinks Trump will lose in that regard. I'm not so sure, but he doesn't want to put too much attention towards himself right now. So there's a good chance I think Biden will refuse to debate. I'm not so sure. I have a feeling it's probably going to happen anyways, at least one debate. But there's growing talk about it. It's very interesting. Coming up right next is the Sound Judgment game for a great prize. Got a call right now, though, 407-916-5400 to play Sound Judgment. We'll have that next. And, of course, Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well in 2 minutes here on Good Morning Orlando. Got another one of the top stories for you right now. Masks could be a strongly recommended addition in Brevard County schools this fall. School officials yesterday discussed their reopening plans for next month, and one feature urges students and others to wear masks. But masks will only be required in certain situations. Brevard parents will be given 3 options to keep their kids at home for online learning, including a hybrid model that includes online and classroom learning. We're going to talk more about this in a moment, and we update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning on Good Morning Orlando.
Now on FM 94.1, still on FM 93.1, 107.7 HD3, AM 540, and the iHeart Radio app. This is News Radio WFLA Orlando.
The debate continues in this country and here in the state of Florida on whether we should reopen schools. As of right now in the state of Florida, they're mandated to reopen in some way. And we know that the Trump administration is pushing all schools across the country to reopen for in-classroom visits for the schools across the country. Otherwise, he's going to withhold some funding, or at least try to. I don't know how much that's going to work. But I agree with what DeSantis is doing. I think options are a good thing. There are a lot of kids out there that when you do in-classroom learning, there's a lot of kids that are doing the at-home learning, but their parents aren't at home, and a lot of those kids are in daycares anyway. So if they're in daycares and there's no threat of this thing spreading, why can't they be in the classroom? Also, we're looking at many countries in Europe that did reopen, in fact, weeks ago, and there is no sign that reopening those schools caused an increase in spread in those countries. A lot of that has to do with the fact that children are not really susceptible to this virus. If they catch it, they don't have as many symptoms. They don't get as sick. But they're also, the viral load in children seems to be so low that they're not spreading this virus to adults as much either. In fact, there's more of a chance that they'll spread it at home to their parents than they will if they go to school. That's what the data shows so far. And because of that, the Trump administration continues to push for this, including yesterday, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany talked about why schools need to reopen.
President Trump continues to fight for equal opportunity in our schools by boldly and firmly underscoring the absolute necessity of America's schools to reopen this fall. The data is clear. Sustained school closures hurt students who have fewer resources the most. McKinsey & Co. created these models. I have some graphs for you to estimate the potential impact of school closures, and they found this, quote, how much learning students lose during school closures varies significantly by access to remote learning, the quality of remote instruction, home support, and the degree of engagement. Students who experience average quality remote learning progress, but at a slower pace. Students who are getting lower quality remote learning stagnate at current grade levels. And students who are not getting instruction at home lose significant ground, with some students dropping out altogether.
Now, Governor Ron DeSantis agrees with Kaylee and President Trump on this. He talked about yesterday when he was in Jacksonville why keeping the schools closed is not a good idea.
You talk to teachers about what happens over the summer and how there's a summer lag. Well, geez, now we're from mid-March all the way now. And in spite of good efforts with the online, it's just not the same. So I worry about that gap.
Here's the thing, though. Why are conservatives in such a rush to reopen schools? A lot of conservatives are wary of what the public schools are doing in teaching our kids, and we understand there are problems with public schools. I don't disagree with DeSantis or Kaylee. I think there are problems with distance learning, but why? What does that really say about our society that we move to online learning and the kids get so far behind? I think it's the same reason too many kids get behind when they actually go to school. Lack of parental involvement. Why are we so desperate as a society to put our kids back in the public schools? Is it because we don't want to be more responsible for our kids' education? We don't want to pay attention as parents to what the kids are doing? Because if they're at home, if they're doing online learning, the parents have to be more involved. It's required for it to work. And it seems like a lot of parents don't want to be more involved. They want the babysitters at the schools to take care of their kids during the day so they don't have to worry about it. What does that actually say about our society? Is this more proof that parents are not involved enough in our kids' education, which has caused many different problems in our society? That's an angle that I feel like nobody's thinking about, but this seems like an example of that. 407-916-5400. You can also text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. Does anyone agree with me? Is this another sign that parents are failing their kids across this country, unfortunately? Or am I thinking too deeply into this? We'll get to that next. We have Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well in 2 minutes here on Good Morning Orlando. President Trump is hinting at a pardon for a former associate. That is one of the top stories for you today. In an interview with Fox News, President Trump was asked if he was thinking of pardoning or commuting the sentence of Roger Stone. He said, "I'm always thinking." Stone was convicted of witness tampering and lying to Congress during the Russia investigation. We always update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning on Good Morning Orlando.
News Radio WFLA Orlando is available everywhere with the iHeartRadio app. Now #1 for podcasting. News Radio WFLA Orlando, an iHeart radio station.
Welcome back to Good Morning Orlando. This is Yaffee filling in for Bud. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. That's Yaffee. A lot of people on the text line, Melissa, are mad at me. I'm not allowed to. I'm not allowed to talk about this because I don't have kids. So.
All right, reset it for me. Tell us why everyone's mad at you.
Well, because I've just suggested that this is another example of parents not being involved in their kids' education.
Oh, you just don't have kids.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
The problem,
I just don't know.
You don't know.
We all see the stats that distance learning really isn't working as well. And we see the stats of actually kids in the classroom in public schools regularly. It's not working as well. And we talk about how parents need to be more involved in their kids' education. I bring that up and they say, okay, well, yeah, you're just insensitive because I have to go to work. I can't be involved in my kids' education. I have to work and we need 2 incomes to survive. So does that mean you're never involved even when they're in the classroom? I'm not saying you have to be there when they're doing distance learning the whole time. I'm just saying you have to be involved. When you get home from work, check that your kids did the work.
Have you ever done distance learning?
Have I ever? Yeah, I have in college.
No. I'm talking about with, school age, elementary school kids, junior high kids, any of that curriculum. Yeah, it's hard, and the parents
say it wasn't
can't
hard.
just float in there, It's difficult. Alan, there wasn't even computers when you were in high school.
There wasn't even schools
when
I was a kid.
Yeah?
No, that's Bud.
I'm not saying, I totally understand the work situation. And yes, I don't have kids, so maybe I am just looking at this. But we always talk about on this show, for years we've talked about how parents are not involved in their kids' education enough, and that's the teachers are frustrated at that. They blame the teachers or their kids fall behind, and I'm saying this is just another example of that, and now I'm insensitive.
Right, I 100% agree with where you're going, okay? The parents are about 90% cause of children's issues in school or out of school, acting out, misbehaving, all that stuff. It means they're looking for attention, and the only attention they're getting at home probably is negative. They're not getting what they need. Do you remember there was an ad campaign that came out called How Was School Today? Ran on the radio, reminding parents to actually be involved with their children's lives.
We need an ad campaign to tell us to do that as parents.
Right. Why does the government need to have a full-scale campaign to remind people to show the minimum amount of interest in the tiny little humans they chose to create?
Well, I mean, that's a blanket statement because there are many fine parents who are involved in their kids' lives. It's just like with anything. There's good people and bad people. People are doing the right thing. People who are not doing the right thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I believe your ex-wife was a teacher, and you talked about how she gets frustrated at a lot of the undisciplined kids out there because the parents aren't involved, and it's a problem.
Yeah, she got frustrated, but she had an iron hand in the classroom, and
she filled the gap.
That
is what
lasted
you're saying.
about one day.
Let's take a call here. And by the way, I agree with Trump and DeSantis that the schools should be open in some way. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just looking at the bigger picture.
Michael,
here.
before we take Lori, can you pose that maybe homeschooling parents that are homeschooling their kids right now, maybe they call in and tell us how hard it is?
Yeah, it is. I'm not saying it's not difficult. I'm not saying you have to homeschool your kids.
Well,
There's
how many
the distance
hours
learning.
it takes?
Yeah, I'm just saying that maybe this requires parents to be a little more involved right now, and a lot of parents don't want to do that. Let's go to Lori in St. Cloud. Lori, what do you think?
Oh, hi, Yaffee. I agree. I was kind of thinking along the same lines as you. I was a single parent, and it drives me crazy. I had 2 kids in the public school, and when I hear them talk now, like, well, the kids aren't going to get breakfast because they're not going to schools aren't going to open. I can't even believe that we depend on them to feed our children. I lived below the poverty line. My kids always had breakfast. I went without. Public school isn't ideal. But I would probably do anything to have my now grandson homeschooled or some other option. But this has turned into a nanny state. Like we need them to provide. And I'm a conservative, and I just think we've got so many things to change. And public schools should not be a babysitter for our children, our grandchildren. We need to be more involved and try to do our best to fill in the gap if we are going to send them to public school because of what they're teaching. We're not even involved in the curriculum enough. So I'm just real worried about this whole societal idea of them even feeding our children. What is wrong with us? Go without a TV. Go without certain things. Take care of your own children. Don't rely on the state and the government to do it.
And that was the point I was making. Maybe we're too reliant on it. Lori, thank you so much. Should I take this other call?
Yeah, you should go ahead and take that, especially because people are slamming you on the text line for not having children. Bobo's got a really, really interesting point. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you for taking my phone call. Yeah, Michael, I never had no kids. I'm a taxpayer like you are. My money goes to these schools. I feed these kids, I bus these kids to school, and I give them an education. And actually, I feel, I'm doing my part. They have to do their part. And not only that, I think all the grammar kids should be go to school. But all high school kids, just like the colleges, should be on the computers. Actually, they should get rid of the high schools, get rid of the buses, and have the computers at home with the teachers pay them a bigger salary or whatever. Thank you.
All right, Bob, thank you for your call. I'm not going that far. I just want parents to be more involved.
I like the fact, though,
That's
that
all.
even
That's all
though
I'm saying.
at this moment you've chosen not to procreate with your new wife, that you are still a taxpayer and that money is going to the school system.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I have an opinion. That's all. I'm here to give my opinion. I gave my opinion, and everyone seems to disagree with it. Alan, you got news coming up?
I don't know what that's like, Michael.
Yeah.
People disagreeing with you?
Mm-hmm.
The Commander-in-Chief visiting Southern Command and get ready to mask up at Starbucks. Those stories and others, plus traffic and weather together and elsewhere. In just 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando, it is 7:31.
Now on FM 94.1. Still on FM 93.1. News Radio WFLA Orlando. And still on AM 540.
And right now we're getting an update on the coronavirus, the latest news on the coronavirus. So with our national correspondent, Bill Zimfer. And Bill, please give us some good news today.
Yeah, we have some for you, Michael, although I must admit it gets tougher and tougher to come by each and every day now. But the good news from around the world, in the UK, they are now ending their quarantine rules for travel from 70 countries into the UK. They had required that anybody coming in from those countries quarantine themselves for 14 days in the UK. However, the United States not on this list. So if you are traveling in from the United States, you still have to go into quarantine. Also, in Japan, they are easing restrictions on large events. They will now allow events with a maximum attendance of 5,000, which is a huge step for Japan in the midst of the pandemic. And also, Russia is saying that they have 17 promising vaccine candidates that they are continuing to work on. Out of that, their health minister says they are hopeful that 3 or 4 of them will be ready for mass distribution, perhaps by the end of the year. So we continue to have a lot of progress made on the vaccine front all around the world, really.
Yeah, that is the good news, but moving on to some bad news right here in Florida. Yeah. What are the latest numbers?
Yeah, not good. In fact, now there is a statement out there that says not only is Florida the epicenter of the COVID-19 in the United States, it could be the new epicenter around the world. We saw some records fall yesterday. 120 deaths in Florida. That's a one-day record. 411 hospitalizations. That's a one-day record. 25 of those deaths were in Central Florida yesterday, 6 each in Broward and in Brevard, rather, in Orange County. And in Brevard, hospital ICU beds are becoming scarce, and surge capacity is now being used in Central Florida hospitals. So luckily, they do have that surge capacity, so they're able to handle the influx of new cases coming in, but it continues to be a very difficult situation. In Florida in particular, we're also seeing the state of Texas with another big day yesterday, 10,000 cases in the state of Texas yesterday. Nationwide, we were over 60,000 cases again yesterday, which is the second day in a row we have hit that threshold. Things not going in the right direction here. In fact, Michael, the World Health Organization is now saying that there is no sign of a slowdown in the biggest countries impacted, those being the United States, Brazil, and India, where we continue to see daily rises in cases. In some instances, those are record rises in cases. So the efforts continue, but again, no real end in sight, especially with the spike in cases in the southern United States.
Yeah, and we've been talking about it this hour, but the debate over whether to open schools continues across the country, and I know the CDC has weighed in on this.
Yeah, in fact, their guidelines are out. They said yesterday that they are not going to revise their guidelines, simply add more information to those guidelines so states can make a determination on how they want to handle it. Those guidelines include 6-foot social distancing between desks, Lunch will be at your desk, no lunchroom. They'll be closing playgrounds and communal spaces in schools. Children over 2 required to wear masks, and schools are recommended to screen children and students for symptoms as they come into school and during the school day every year. So the CDC has those guidelines out. They'll be providing more information, but some difficult decisions ahead as far as schools go, Michael.
Our national correspondent Bill Zimfer giving us much needed information, the important information on the coronavirus. Bill, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you, Michael. You too.
Got the Rush Morning Update next, and Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well. In 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando. Welcome back to the Friday edition of Good Morning Orlando. This is Yaffee filling in for Bud. Alan Spector is here. Melissa Fox is also here today. You know, earlier on in the show, I was talking about the fact that some don't want Joe Biden to debate President Trump. But I just realized something.
What?
There's another person running for president this year.
Yo, Kanye.
Kanye West. Does that mean if he gets enough in the polls, is that possible that there will be debate with Trump, Kanye West, and Joe Biden?
Well,
is there going to be a 3-way debate with Trump and Kanye West? Did you ever think in your life that would be a possibility?
I never even thought Trump and Biden was a possibility, much less Kanye West.
Exactly.
I find it amusing, though, that this morning I was hearing the word presumptive again in front of Joe Biden. Presumptive. So maybe Kanye's run might be for real?
Well, presumptive has been a link to his name.
Are you saying that the Democrats maybe want to change?
Yeah, I'm saying they went for it, that he was going to be their candidate, and then it went back to presumptive. I heard it this morning.
Well, presumptive is used by the news media because he is not officially the nominee yet.
Exactly.
So
the door be open.
But that doesn't infer that Democrats don't want him to be the nominee. That's just a term that is used.
I think it'd be too late to change that.
Unfortunately, what I've heard, though, from a lot of people is vote blue no matter who.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know. They want to vote for Biden to get Trump out of there, but I mean, is that like a sign of the apocalypse if Kanye West, Trump, and Biden are the ones debating?
It's a sign of something. I'm not sure exactly what.
Just throwing it out there. He's running too. He could be debating too. All right. I don't think that's in your news, but you got some more important things to talk about at the top of the hour, Alan.
Like Florida setting another coronavirus record, and the president says he'll wear a mask this weekend. Those stories and others, plus traffic and weather together. In just 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando, it is 7:59.
Now on FM 94.1, still on FM 93.1, 107.7 HD3, AM 540, and the iHeart Radio app. This is News Radio WFLA Orlando.
So we know the cases are going up in Florida. They have been for a few weeks now, but now it looks like the death count is going up. Hospitalizations has increased some. Now, I still believe, like DeSantis does, that a lot of this has to do with increased testing. A lot of young people are getting tested. A lot of asymptomatic people are getting tested. This tells me that there were a lot of people spreading this thing around even during the shutdown. It's just they weren't tested. Nobody knew about it. They were asymptomatic. Now we know about it, and that causes more concern. But when you look at deaths increasing and you look at hospitalization increasing, that is concerning. But is it so concerning that we need to shut down again in the state of Florida? Well, some people are actually calling for that. Dr. Anthony Fauci was on a podcast for the Wall Street Journal earlier this week, and he suggested as much.
You know, I think any state that is having a serious problem, that state should seriously look at shutting down. It's not for me to say because each state is different.
Now, he's not the only one saying that. I got this right off the Drudge Report, a link to an article that says growing chorus pushes for renewed shutdown orders. Of course, my question is, why would we shut down again? Obviously, the previous shutdown didn't work. So why would we do this again? It works temporarily, but is it just delaying the inevitable? That's what I asked when the shutdowns first started.
I know.
What's to stop from this spreading again? And a lot of people are looking at the north, they're looking at Europe. Oh, well, it's not spreading again there. It might. There could be a second wave eventually, even in those places. We don't know. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis tried to give some perspective on all of this. Here's what he said.
A case does not necessarily mean someone's in the hospital or anything like that. It just means they tested positive. And so I think folks should just view it in the proper context and perspective. We would like to see positivity decline. We understand, much more about this virus. You should take precautions, but there's no need to be panicked. There's no need to be fearful. We understand the situations that make this thing more transmissible.
I think his take there is pretty reasonable. Now, there's two big reasons, though, I believe we should not even think about shutting down again. I mean, there's more than two reasons I could give, but two reasons I'm going to give right now. One actually came from Buddy Dyer, Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, who was on this show yesterday, said something I completely agree with, which is surprising. I don't usually agree with him, but here's what he said.
We have to learn to coexist with this virus because I don't see a vaccine coming anytime soon. And Dr. Pino said it pretty well one time. We can't ping pong back and forth between being open, being closed, being open, being closed, because we could do that forever if we don't have a vaccine. We could relax the rules and go to full capacity at restaurants and then be at 1,500 positive tests and have to roll back. So I'm just imploring everybody to do what we can as our civic duty is to protect each other, protect the businesses.
He's exactly right. It's the hard truth. We have to learn to live with this virus. We have to. I mean, the Trump administration got blasted for saying basically that, but it's true. We can't ping pong, go from shutdown to non-shutdown and stuff like that. Now, the main reason we shut down in the first place was to get the hospitals ready for the increase. So are the hospitals ready? Are they facing an increase? Do we need to shut down again because they're overwhelmed? Well, Advent Health CEO Daryl Toll addressed this yesterday in a Facebook Live video. Here's what he said.
Are our hospitals at full capacity?
They are not. Thankfully, we're managing the increase well. There is an increase. We're testing more across the state, and the percentage of positives is going up too, and we are seeing an increase in hospitalizations across the state. In our hospitals, we have about 84% capacity across 7 counties, 16 campuses in total, and ICU capacity is actually a little bit better, 81%. That means almost 20% of our ICU beds are still available for additional patients, and about 16% of total beds. To put that in context, that's normal. So our health system, many health systems in Florida, operate in this range of capacity on a regular basis. The growth of COVID is something we're paying close attention to, but the capacity level is still within a manageable range for us.
I bet most people don't realize what he said there. It's interesting perspective. Where they are in terms of capacity is about normal. There are some hospitals in the state seeing an increase, getting close to capacity or reaching capacity, but overall in the state, it's pretty normal. So if that's true, a shutdown is not needed right now. But a shutdown wouldn't solve the problem. We shut down before, and it didn't solve the problem. What do you think about this? 407-916-5400. And also text to 23680. We'll get to that next. And Orlando's news, weather, and traffic as well in 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando. Here's another news update for you right now. Hospitals in Volusia County are feeling the effects of the rise in coronavirus cases. State health officials say 3 Advent Health hospitals in DeLand, Daytona Beach, and Orange City had no ICU beds available yesterday. Among its 5 hospitals in Volusia and Flagler counties, only 2% of ICU beds were available. But hospital officials say across Central Florida, they actually have 20% of their ICU beds available. We always update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning right here on News Radio WFLA Orlando.
News Radio WFLA Orlando is available everywhere with the iHeartRadio app. Now #1 for podcasting. News Radio WFLA Orlando, an iHeart radio station.
You know, another reason why I against shutdowns generally, other than the reasons I cited, is I think the first shutdown made people kind of lax about the whole thing once it was over. They went through it for a month. Things seemed kind of quiet and made people let their guard down. They said, we sacrificed all of this. Now we can get back to normal. And that's what they did. And it just spread the virus more. But we can't continue to shut down. It's too devastating to our economy, to people's lives, to our country as a whole. I think Buddy Dyer was right. We have to learn to live with this virus. We have a bunch of texts coming in, Melissa, some pretty interesting.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Florida, the numbers of death has vacillated during the past 6 weeks. For the USA, the total death count's actually been on decline since April 11th.
It has vacillated some
there it is.
over the past couple of weeks, but yesterday was a pretty bad day in terms of the death count. You know, one text I found really interesting was it talked about hospital ICU capacity in large cities are typically around 95%. That is actually true.
It's the plan.
A lot of people don't know that. During the shutdown, they were actually a lot lower than normal. Usually they're around 90 to 95%. When they were down to like 70% across the country, that was actually unusual. It says here they also have many non-ICU rooms that are easily converted to ICU to increase capacity.
Exactly. And since they had canceled most elective surgeries at that point, sure, they freed up a lot more beds. Here's a texter that says, regarding the coronavirus, the people just don't care anymore. They're simply just aren't scared of catching it. They're tired of worrying about it. They can't wait for the day when the media stops pushing this narrative that the virus is something we need to be scared of. It's here. We don't care. Get over it. See, that's the mentality I think that's causing us issues, though, a little bit.
Well, and, you know, that's something you've been talking about, Alan. Too many people were too lackadaisical after the shutdown. They weren't practicing the right social distancing, weren't wearing a mask, and that caused some of the problems.
No, definitely. You know, and I said earlier this morning, I was in favor of the original shutdown. But at this point, there's no end in sight to this.
Right.
Even if we get a vaccine, surveys show that up to 25-30% of people say they won't take the vaccine because they don't believe in vaccines. You got the anti-vax movement that's out there. And some people are just afraid that this is some kind of government plot to indoctrinate them with a vaccine that's going to put them under government control. I've heard that. I've heard that argument.
Yeah.
No, what's funnier is I've heard, how come they're doing swabs? They're getting your DNA. They're putting you on. Yeah, I know. You people with the conspiracy theories.
I have a feeling,
check out George Norrie overnight, okay?
Everybody is so darn suspicious these days.
I know of everything.
The government,
And by the way, the anti-vaxxing movement, that's on both sides
of
the political aisle. I mean, it's quite
You know
crazy.
what's funny about the vaccine thing? If they were going to put some sort of a national ID chip, it wouldn't go into your bloodstream. Okay, that's just ineffective.
Yeah, and
it has to sit somewhere stationary. So
yeah, I mean,
do the math, people.
You know, I brought that up just as a ridiculous argument that some people are making for not
right. But
getting
let me
the
shoot
vaccine.
It down for you. Alan.
Yeah, but the point I'm making about the fact that even when we get a vaccine, some people won't take it. Is the coronavirus is going to stay around for a long time because even the vaccine is going to take at least till the end of the year, if not into next year. And, so we've got to, as you said, as Mayor Dyer said, we've got to learn to coexist with it, but we need to be responsible along with that.
Yeah, and I think what the texter said actually made a good point. People are sick of it. And another shutdown would make them even more sick of it and would just be even crazier after the second shutdown, I think. So we'll see what happens, though. I mean, it's definitely going to be a topic, unfortunately, here for the next few weeks, I'm sure.
Yeah, and even though coronavirus cases are spiking, we're getting a visit from President Trump today in Florida. And the search for a TV star continues out in California. Those stories and others, plus traffic and weather together and elsewhere in just 2 minutes, 8:29 on Good Morning Orlando.
Headline right now, President Trump is slamming two new Supreme Court rulings. He called the rulings part of a witch hunt and a hoax. The Supreme Court said investigators in New York can seek Trump's financial records. In another case involving congressional subpoenas against Trump, it sent it back to a lower court. We update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning on Good Morning Orlando.
Now on FM 94.1, still on FM 93.1, News Radio WFLA Orlando, and still on AM 540.
Paul Larkin is a senior legal research fellow at the Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Paul is going to give us his expertise on the Supreme Court rulings we just talked about. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So give us your take on those two rulings dealing with Trump's financial records. Were they a win or a loss for Trump?
Well, they were a little of both. It often happens that way. But he won part of the case and lost the other. He argued that he was absolutely immune from responding to any subpoenas by the New York Manhattan District Attorney or Congress. And the Supreme Court rejected that argument. On the other hand, they did say that he doesn't have to just turn over anything and everything whenever anybody like a district attorney or Congress asks. In the case of the district attorney, the Supreme Court thought that the grand jury provided certain protections that weren't available in other circumstances, and so they were more willing to allow a grand jury to see records involving criminal activity. In the case of Congress, Supreme Court was far less willing to let Congress just willy-nilly demand that a president turn over whatever it wants, and that's because the Supreme Court recognized that we have both a structural problem, since Articles 1 and 2 are sometimes in conflict, and nowadays we also have a political problem, which is they're not just in conflict, they're at each other's throats. So he can't just stiff-arm the grand jury and Congress, but he can put in a very good argument that this is an abusive process.
Do you think he's ever going to have to release these records to the public?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, right now the cases go back to the trial courts, and it depends on how quickly they act. But I think it's more likely than not that if he is not reelected in November, these cases will go away.
And I know there were some other major Supreme Court rulings this week, including a big one that had to do with the Obamacare mandate and the Little Sisters of the Poor having to provide contraception. How did that turn out?
Well, the Little Sisters of the Poor have been fighting for years simply to be able to say our religious beliefs prohibit us from participating in the contraceptive mandate under Obamacare. And the Obama administration made exceptions for a variety of other types of businesses and the like, but they didn't make one for the Little Sisters of the Poor. And the bottom line is, it sure looks like what they were trying to do was just demand that organizations like the Little Sisters kowtow to the morality that was adopted by the Obama administration. And the Supreme Court basically told them, "Niet, you can't do that."
Yeah, does this open the door for other organizations like that one to do the same thing, refuse to provide these services, to provide contraception services?
It opens the door, at least for them to be able to argue. I don't know how many other organizations will be able to say they're just like the Little Sisters of the Poor. They do seem to be a very attractive litigant in this context. I mean, I imagine if you are Omni Megacorp and you say, I have a moral opposition to doing this, the courts won't look at it kindly. But other religious organizations can now make the same sort of argument.
Oh, that makes sense. Is there anything else that happened in the Supreme Court this week that you wanted to highlight for our listeners?
Well, I don't know what the law in Florida is, but the law in some places allows people allows the government to punish people if they don't cast their ballot in the Electoral College in the way that the state has voted. And the Supreme Court has said that electors do not have a right to independently go against the wishes of the state. Now, whether that has an effect in Florida, I don't know, because I don't know Florida law, but that's another big one, given the fact that we've got a presidential election coming up.
And how do you feel about that? Do you think the court made the right decision there?
I do. what you have is a circumstance where the Constitution is silent about the issue. And if the Constitution is silent, what that should mean is that it's not up to the federal government to answer the question. It's up to the states. So that was one of the principles that the framers operated on when they adopted the Constitution, when they drafted it. And the Supreme Court just applied it faithfully in this context.
Now, I have heard in recent years that some states want to make it where their electoral votes go to whoever won the popular vote across the country. Would this ruling affect that as well if states started doing that?
Well, if all states came to that sort of agreement, then yes, that would have an enormous effect. If enough states came to that agreement, it would also have an enormous effect. But right now, there isn't a critical mass of states that has agreed to that. And so unless something remarkable happens between now and November, it won't affect this election.
But, I mean, this ruling pretty much gives the states the option to do that if they want to, it sounds like.
It certainly seems that way, yes.
Wow. Paul Larkin with the Heritage Foundation giving us his expertise on the Supreme Court rulings. Thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We have an update on Orlando's news, weather, and traffic in 2 minutes on Good Morning Orlando. Final news update for you right now. Masks could be strongly recommended. Could be a strongly recommended addition in Brevard County schools this fall. School officials yesterday discussed their reopening plans for next month, and one feature urges students and others to wear masks, but masks will only be required in certain situations. Brevard parents will be given 3 options to keep their kids at home for online learning, including a hybrid model that includes online and classroom learning. We update the top stories every 10 minutes every morning on Good Morning Orlando.
Listen to us anywhere on the iHeartRadio app. Search WFLA Orlando.
So, speaking of the debate over reopening schools, earlier on in the show, I know a lot of you were listening, I talked about how the Trump administration and Governor DeSantis is pushing to have the schools reopen because studies suggest that distance learning is failing a lot of students, failing a lot of kids. And I don't doubt those facts. And I agree that we should have options for schools to be open. I also think we should have options for online learning. Options are a good thing. Choice is a good thing. But all I did was suggest that maybe one of the reasons why distance learning fails so much is it's another example of too many parents in our society not being enough involved in their kids' education. Now, this isn't a new topic. We've talked about this many times on this show when it comes to public schools in general. And I just said, this is just another example of that. And man, all of a sudden, conservatives on the text line were blasting me because I suggested that maybe we should have more individual responsibility and not depend on the government to take care of our kids so much.
I have a texter that agrees with you, sort of. Yaffee is partially correct. You also have some teachers there that just want to get a paycheck who don't care. And our education system needs a major overhaul. Not all kids are meant to go to college. Some could be taught a trade in high school and come out and start their business or at least have a nice job. Many children who are good and interested in 1 or 2 subjects, but not all. So they know what they want to do in college. They could get getting their education in high school, maybe limit some of the other subjects. Kind of went off base there a little there.
I mean, some of that is just reforming the education system, which I agree with some of that. But all I suggest, I wasn't saying you have to homeschool your kids. I wasn't saying that. I understand that both parents have to work a lot of times. That makes things tough for them. All I'm saying is I think too many times in this country, parents are just not involved at all. Doesn't mean you have to be there all the time, even when they're distance learning. Just keep up with what your kids are doing. We see this so much. We've talked about this so much. I don't know why so many people got mad at me over just suggesting that.
Well, that was my attitude as a parent. My main goal was to always be there, as well as my wife's goal, for whatever our kids needed, to be there, be interested, and anything they expressed an interest in, whatever we could do to facilitate that, we would.
Yeah, it seems, sounded pretty conservative to me. I don't know. All right, appreciate you listening this morning. Bud will be back on Monday. I'll end the show just like he does, though. God bless you, and God bless America. Catch you next time.